Let's take a look at how content is managed on Drupal. In the Umami demo, we already have a couple of different structures built and some content on the website. So this should make it a little bit easy to take a look at how this is managed. It's important to point out that Umami as a demo is focused on food and article sort of content, and that multilingual content is enabled. Your website might not have multilingual content and may not have these same content structures, but the basics are still the same. First, Drupal organizes different content types for the website. And in this case, we have an article, a basic page, and a recipe. Drupal gives us the ability to have multiple fields. In the case of a basic page, it's typically just a title and a body. In the case of an article, there are typically other fields. In this case, we have an additional media image and tags. And in the case of a recipe, we have quite a few fields to really help fill in a template. If we go to the content page, we can see any existing content here. You can also see other details like what content type each item is, who authored it, whether or not it's published, in other words, live on the website, when it was last updated, and a few different operations. You can edit, translate, or delete. Translate is only available if multilingual is enabled on the website. There may be additional options for your website. There are bulk actions at the top of this main content management screen. And you also have a few different filter options if you're looking for something specific. Let's go ahead and filter by recipe so we can take a look at a few different recipes that we have here. We see here there is a gluten-free pizza. Let's go ahead and take a look at what that looks like in the backend. So here you can see there are different fields filled in. Some of them are required as indicated by this red asterisk. And there are various fields of different types. So there are media images, that's an image upload. We can see there's a body field, several different ingredients that pull into a list, another recipe instruction, and yet another WYSIWYG field. And you can also see some workflow status at the very bottom. This may or may not be enabled on your website. On the right-hand side, we have some basic information about who created this item, any sort of revisions if we need to make a change and indicate what that change is about. The URL alias, that is the pretty URL that an end user would see when they load the page. So /recipe/ whatever the page title is typically the default. There may be some changes that you may want to make to the author information. And sometimes content may use these Drupal settings for promotion. This is especially true in things like forums where you might have things at the top of a list, or in the case of things that might get promoted to the front page. You can certainly delete content. I would caution if deleting any content because this cannot be undone. And there are a few other options in terms of any sort of revisions if you want to revert back and forth between revisions. If we take a look at the content itself, this gives us a bit of a preview of how the theme has styled this content type in particular. So your Drupal theme may take into account different content types and have different templates for those, which is, of course, the strength of that. It takes a lot of the hard work of styling out of it. Now, there are other content structures in Drupal to help with various purposes. One of the major ones is taxonomy. We were just taking a look at a recipe. So let's go ahead and take a look at some of these recipe categories to see what sort of terms are in here. We can see there are a number of terms here, and we can also add terms if we need to. So maybe we want to say a different recipe category for, I don't know, appetizers, or maybe a cocktail. If we hit save, we'll see that that was saved, and we can go back to the recipe category, list the terms, and now we can see cocktail is available. If we create a new recipe, that new recipe category will be available, and we can use that for search filtering, orienting users to let them know what that term means in reference to a recipe. Of course, you may have a lot more taxonomy relevant to your content, and we would recommend working, of course, with an information architect and a designer to help select what may be appropriate for your website. There are also different media types in Drupal. Out of the box, Drupal comes with audio, document, image, and video. There's an additional community module for remote video to be able to plug in YouTube and Vimeo videos by simply adding the URL to that video without having to add the embed code yourself. That has the advantage, of course, of being able to have that embed code change universally over the entire website if YouTube or Vimeo changes those things. So you don't have to go page by page. Now, those media types can be used within fields or in the WYSIWYG. Blocks and views are a little bit more of a complex structure in Drupal, but they are certainly very important. We'll go over a little bit more detail in separate videos about Layout Builder and how that helps you with things like landing pages. But suffice it to say that blocks are tiny page components that can be laid out. Blocks also give you the ability to create different templates for those different things. And the block library itself in the Umami theme is pretty basic, but there are different blocks that may show up in the header and the footer. So blocks are not just about what you as a content manager may use, but also a construct that we use to put in global elements in the header and the footer and other common areas that might be a bit more dynamic. Views, on the other hand, are something that may create either a page or a part of a page for things like listing out recent blog posts or recent recipes in the case of the Umami theme. And as you can see here under the Views menu, which may be disabled on your website to avoid changing something that may be overwritten by code changes, this helps illustrate the different types of constructs that may help dynamically list out content. So for example, you can see some of the administrative pages are also in here to list out content. Let's go ahead and visit, for example, this files list. Think of this more as a database query. We're querying the database to find a list of items. So that's what Views allows us to do. Please work with your developers to determine whether or not Views would be appropriate for you if you're not very familiar with it, and certainly illustrate your use case to help see whether or not it's a good fit. The last thing that we're going to take a look at in terms of content structure is menus. Drupal has a menu system. A lot of times we'll come out of the box with things like a main menu and maybe an administrative menu. Others are typically added. So for example, under this tools menu, we can take a look and see what sort of items are under here. And other menu systems like the main navigation are going to have primarily what you see at the top of the screen. So let's go ahead and go back to the site. Sure enough, home, articles, recipes, right at the top. Oftentimes as a content manager, you may see these little icons when you're floating over things, when you're logged in as that, and it may give you the ability to just simply jump right into editing menus. If you need to add an item, you can either add a link here, or when you're actually editing the content itself, you may be able to edit it and then say which menu item you want to show up. Let's actually pick one that's in English, so that way it's easier to see. We can provide a menu link directly in the node edit form as well. So that's the basics of content structures in Drupal. Of course, a lot more can be added either by developers or site builders, as well as extended through community modules and custom components.